So if you got your Bibles, let's turn to Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. Last night was definitely geared towards the married couples. Today is going to be geared towards singles. I want to be careful because sometimes when you say it's geared towards married couples and all the singles shut down on you, and then when you say it's geared towards the singles, all the married folks shut down on you. And so what I would urge you to do, just like your pastor said last night, these principles apply in so many ways. And so as we remain open to them, we learn and we hear things that will help us in all areas. Plus, you never know who you're going to have to minister to. Amen. And so these are things that are important for us to understand. And so Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. It says, "And the Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely do what? Die. And the Lord said, It is not good the man should be alone. I will make a helpmeet for him. And out of the ground of the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. And Adam gave names to all the cattle and all the fowl of the air and every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helpmeet for him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he woman. And he brought her unto man, and said, Now this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, and the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed." And one of the things I wanted to understand is, as we talk about a certain thing, this particular teaching, I wish I had when I was young. Amen. And I mean young like when I was 12, 13, 14, in my teens. I wish I had understood some of these things we're about to talk about right now, because it would have helped me make such better decisions and to understand a lot of the things that we go through. And so one thing you have to realize, number one, is man did not say that it wasn't good for himself to be alone. God is the one who said it. And it is when God began to create all the animals, you have to recognize that God did not create Eve the same way he created everything else. Everything else was created from the dust of the ground. But he took Eve out of Adam and made woman from the womb of man. And that's what makes the relationship between Adam and Eve so much more different than animal relationships, because both male and female animals were made from the dirt. But Eve was actually made from the womb of man, which gives you the continuity of cycle. It is man who has created woman, or woman has come out of man, and then man comes out of woman. And so we now have a complete circle, which is where the nature of what God was saying, I will make you a helpmeet, not a helpmate, but a helpmeet. Yeah. And so what is a helpmeet? A helpmeet is one who's uniquely designed to help you achieve and to accomplish the vision that you have for the family. And so it is not just a helpmate, because if you think it's a helpmate, then you will believe that as long as they have the correct plumbing, then that person is the right person for you. And that is not the case. What is the case is that a person has to be yoked in a way that understands the vision of where you're going, and you guys can build something together. And so now it is compatibility, not just availability. That's good. Are you understanding what I'm saying? And so being alone is not a sign of a defect. And I'm telling you, people really struggle, particularly when we minister to singles. They're like, well, why am I still alone? Well, listen, you can be alone and not be lonely. Yeah. And when you find yourself alone and lonely, then there's some things you are going to have to work on to get prepared to be ready for a relationship. Because how do you know when someone's ready for a relationship? When they have equally understood not only the good, but the bad. Because a lot of people are clear about the good when it comes to a relationship when they're trying to get into one, but they're not good about the bad side of what it takes. And so you have to recognize that with anything, there is all good and bad. And as Adam is being shown all these animals, you can almost see God's plan in the fact that God is showing him 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. He's watching all these animals do things that he's not able to do, and he's wondering, where in the world is my help me? Building in him a desire that when God created woman, he's like, whoa, man, that's the bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And now he has someone who is suitable to him. So what you have to recognize, particularly you single folks, stop looking in the animals to find your helpmeet. Amen. Because they're not in the animals. Chicken heads and dogs are not. Amen. Are you understanding what I'm saying? And so when you are looking for what is suitable for you, so many people want to take an animal and make a helpmeet out of it, and they're not helpmeets. Your helpmeet is uniquely designed and suitable to you. Now, how long it takes that person to come, listen, that's really up to you. Because God's working on you just as much as he's working on them. And God loves them enough not to give you to them prior to you being ready. And people think, well, I just want to be married and I just want to do, well, that's great and you should have a godly desire. But that should not change what you do and how you handle things, because God is also working on you, and he loves you and he loves that person he's working on as well. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Yeah. And so when we get to the place of desperation, we forget about looking for suitability and we start looking amongst the animals. And your helpmeet is not in the animals. In the Greek mind, there are 5 words that are used for the word love. One of the unique challenges of translation is the fact that when you're translating Hebrew to English or you're translating Greek to English, Greek is a little more different in its translation, or in other words, how you translate it. But even no matter how good of a job you do, there are still some difficulties and challenges taking another language and translating it into another. And so when you say the word love, people think all love is the same. It is not the same. You can love your dog, you just don't love your dog. Are you understand what I'm saying? You love your kids, but you do not love your kids the way you love your husband or your wife. And so love is not it's not a universal term, or it's not interchangeable throughout the Bible. There are different words used that are translated love, and if you don't study it, you will not know exactly what they are referencing. And so the first one, let's go to Mark 12, verse 38. Mark 12, 38. And he said unto him in his doctrine, beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing, love salutations in the marketplaces. They love the chief seats in the synagogues, the uppermost rooms at the feast, which devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. In other words, they maintain vanity at all costs. Lying, cheating, stealing. They have to be the center of the attention, and they never give back what they take from you. That word love there is thelu, Thelo. Sometimes you see it with an extra O. So in other words, Theloo. That is a self-love. And the challenge with a self-love is gone to the extreme. It produces narcissism and selfishness. The University of Oakland did a study, and they found that one of the reasons why exes continue to try to slide into your DMs and continue to try to reach out to you is that there's a narcissistic button in them that they want to maintain some level of information and keep tabs on you. See, narcissism is a very bad thing when it's taken to extreme. Now, the other side of extreme is that you don't love yourself. And now, listen, here's a really big, the Bible says what? To love others as you love yourself. You realize you need to love yourself in order to love others. Because if you hate yourself, then you're going to hate others as you hate yourself. Do you see the connection? And so you've got to love yourself. You've got to have value in who you are, because if you don't value who you are, no one else will. You teach people how to treat you by how you allow them to deal with you. And I've watched so many people in toxic relationships, and they go from one toxic relationship to the next, and they're like, I don't understand why I keep attracting the same type of guy. Well, that's because you're the same type of woman. If you're, as a guy, you're attracting the same type of woman, it's because you're still the same type of guy. And so when you begin to learn how important it is for you to value who you are and not allow people to dictate your value, then you don't tolerate certain types of behaviors and certain types of things. And so when people are dealing with you in a way that's inappropriate to how you feel you should be dealt with, you put that in check very quickly. But a lot of people are afraid that they might lose a relationship, but they don't realize that if you're dealing with a narcissist, they cannot return to you what they take from you.
Amen.
And I don't care how many times you try to get somebody to lay hands on them, you can rub their hair smooth off their head. They're not going to change, because narcissism is a disease that will cause them to always want to take. That's why I said they love the chiefest seats. They love the best seats in the house. They want the attention. When they pray in long-winded prayers in order to impress people. They're all about attention, they're all about taking, and they're not about giving.
Amen.
So when you understand that Thelu is self-love, then you begin to recognize when people say, I love you, by their behavior, you'll be able to determine what type of love they're talking about. Does that make sense? The next one is Philea love. Philea is where you get Philadelphia from. And so Philadelphia, the church, which is the city of brotherly love, which really there's not much brotherly love in Philadelphia. I grew up there, so I can tell you. But the realities are that Philea is a friendly affection. This is where you get things like fraternities. This is a companionship. This is an affection. This is based on pleasure, not character. When you are joined to a fraternity, they don't check the character of the people in the fraternity. Right. They just make sure that you belong to the brotherhood. Right. And as long as you belong, there's no character involved. One of the challenges with Philea love is the nature of dating. See, you know the Bible never talks about dating. Right. The Bible talks about courting. And courting, for lack of better terms, is dating with the intention to marry. Right. And so dating is the place where you enjoy being with someone. You enjoy having companionship. You begin to research the criteria of what it is you like. Dating should involve data. That's really all it's about. It's finding out who the person is, what they are about, and enjoying companionship. It is not a place to explore sexual compatibility. It is a place specifically to understand this is the place where love starts. But this is not the place where it ends. Are you with me? And so a lot of times people can be stuck in the friend zone and not realize that because you've handled this type of love in the wrong way, you get qualified as a friend. And I remember in my years of coming up, I would be quick to say, if I want a friend, I'll buy a dog. Because dogs will love you no matter what happens. They're always excited to see you. You can walk out 5 minutes later, come back. It's like you've been gone for years. But Philea love is in the place where you establish relationship and companionship. And Philea love is the substratum of some of the others as you begin to build on it. But Philea love is never going to be the entirety of it all. And so then the third type of love is Storge, S-T-O-R-G-E. S-T-O-R-G-E. So the first one is Thelu, second one is Philea, and the third is Storge, S-T-O-R-G-E. Now, Storge love is an experiential love. It's an affection. The best way to articulate that is to say it this way. When you kiss your mother, it is not the same as when you kiss your wife. But it's still a kiss. If you held hands with your husband, it's not the same as if you held hands with your dad. The nature of the action may be similar, but the meaning behind it is very, very different. And so storge is an experiential love. It's an affection. It's how a mother loves her child, and she loves her child as she would give her life for her child. That is not the same as the relationship between, let's say, someone else she may love, a good friend, and say, I love you, but she's not telling you, I'll give my life for you, not as she would for her own child. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so that's a smile, that's a hug, that's a kiss. It may mean absolutely nothing to the person who does it, but it could mean everything to a person who receives it. And so this is why a lot of times you'll see a female who a guy will extend some level of gesture, and then she'll walk away thinking, he loves me. And he no more meant that than the man on the moon. Or a girl will hug a guy, and all of a sudden she holds 2 seconds longer than probably normal, and then he's walking away thinking, oh my gosh, she loves me. See, these are experiential type things that when you are trying to, here's a good one. When you're trying to maintain boundaries in your life, you have to be careful of how people interpret this type of love. Because when you're maintaining boundaries, if you're a single female, you shouldn't be hugging on single men for long periods of time or anything. And you're thinking, well, isn't that kind of ridiculous? If you want to avoid problems, you better pay attention. Because these are the types of things that when you understand these types of love, you begin to see why people, because I've had many times where people say, I don't know where they got that idea from. What do you mean where they got that idea from? Every time you see them, you're sitting next to them. Every time you see them, you're running up and giving them a hug. You're interacting with them in a way, oh, well, they're just a friend. Well, then treat them like a friend. Right. Understand these types of love and deal with them in accordance to what a friend would do. And so then the fourth type is eros, E-R-O-S, eros. Eros love is a sexual attraction love. It's where we get the word erotic from. This is not character-based, but this is attraction-based. This is the one that the world confuses with real love. Amen. Time should always be taken to uncover the other types of love first. In other words, as you are building through love, eros should never be where it starts. Eros should be where it ends. Because when eros is the last type of love you explore with someone, and you begin to build all of the other ones, then you find that eros, number one, is not dangerous because it's in the context of a commitment, it's in the context of a covenant, and it's in the context of a marriage. Amen. And so when you look at how people are dealing with things in their life, you have to uncover these types of issues that people are struggling with. Because anything that is not transformed will have to be controlled. Anything you will not allow God to deal with and to shape and mold in you, you're going to have to figure out a way to control it. And when you have to spend all your time trying to control something, then how many of you understand you really have a hard time moving forward? Yeah. Because it's going to occupy all of your mind, effort, and time, putting you in a position to have to deal with things you didn't really want to deal with. And so Sunday, we're going to talk about soul ties, but I wanted to hit a couple of things real quick, highlights, because a lot of times when people lead with sex and eros, they have, how do I say this? People will permit or allow people that they're involved with intimately to mistreat and abuse them. And then they're like, well, how did I get in this abusive relationship? Because you led with sex. And sex becomes a hook that works in you that is what will allow you to be mistreated and still sleep with somebody. To be mistreated and still stay connected to a person who you know is not treating you appropriately. I remember I was watching, it was a police show, and they were saying, the cops were saying that when they walk into a domestic violence situation, if it's a husband who's abusing the wife, they said most of the time you would think that the wife is safe. But they said she's not. Because when they come in, they always put their back to the wall and they watch both people. Because the moment they have to jump on a husband to get him out of there, she's going to jump on the police. Even though 5 minutes beforehand, the husband was whooping on her. And that's crazy. Yeah. They're there to save her, and now she's attacking them for attacking the one who attacked her. And the only way you can get that level of craziness going on is there's got to be soul ties. There has to be things intimately involved, which is why when people come to me and say, well, I want premarital guidance or I want some premarital help, it's like, well, have you guys been intimate? Because if they've been intimate, it's pretty much a guarantee there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to keep them from wanting to get married. But if they haven't been sexually involved, I've had many of those situations turn around to where they woke up and saw the problem and walked away and avoided a disaster. And it's funny, the key indication as to whether or not they will listen to reason or not is whether they've led with this eros sexual type of love. Even when a relationship is over, you can't stop thinking about a person because you've been intimate with them. Their soul ties connecting. When you can't get over it and you'll compromise anything to keep the relationship going, when people are asking you to compromise your values and your morals just to keep them and you're willing to do it, there's definitely eros is leading in the situation. After an extended period of time, every time you bring up the relationship or you talk about this person, you're still feeling the pain. You're still really, really hurt. They done moved on, got married, had kids, and you are still ticked off about it. There's something there. Are y'all, you getting what I'm throwing down? So it's every time a person's name comes up, you're drawn to want to reach out and connect with that person. Eros breeds a connection and an obsession that is devoid of no. And once you can't say no, you have no freedoms left. See, when there's a connection that you can't say no like any normal person would, then there's got to be something driving that. Yeah. And those who lead with eros love, they struggle with faithfulness because eros always seeks sex and lust in the terms of scratching an itch, not in terms of commitment. And this is why eros is not a completely bad thing. It's just you cannot lead with that. Right. And if you allow that to lead, if you follow society, if you follow the world, if you follow the things that are always promoted out there, you can't even sell a refrigerator without putting a bikini-clad model on top of the refrigerator. What does that have to do with whether or not this refrigerator keeps my food cold? But yet and still, the world knows that if they lead with that, there are hooks that come, and we can almost control and manipulate your buying and your decision-making based on how we handle it. Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so it's literally driven by so much of the nature of desire that it causes you to become blind to flaws. So then the fifth and the last one, let's go to John 3:16 real quick. You should all know that one. John 3:16. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he did what? His only begotten Son, whosoever shall believe in him shall not, but have everlasting life." That word, for God so loved the world, that word love is not any of the four that I just told you. That word is agape. And agape love doesn't require anything for it to function. In other words, agape type of love is not earned. It is not influenced. It is unchangeable. And it is not conditioned upon anything. It responds solely to commitment. So, in other words, when God so loved the world, there is nothing the world can do that will change the fact that he loves the world. Because he committed himself to the world, and he committed himself to us as believers, then his love follows through. Which means that there is nothing you can do to change his type of love, because it does not come from an earned position, it comes as a free gift. And so if you begin to recognize the agape type of love, the agape type of love works on only commitment. It works only on realizing the value and the importance of the person being loved. See, true love always does what is in the best interest of the person being loved. That's true love. And so what we have to recognize is that if it's not based on emotion, because people will say things like, well, we've been together for a while and I just don't love her anymore. The passion is gone. Passion, it does not start commitment. Commitment begets passion. And when God is committed to something, then God has a passion for it. When Jesus said it was his passion to go to the cross, it was his commitment to go to the cross that brought his passion to go to the cross. And so it wasn't something, because if he was completely sold out on the idea, he wouldn't have said, let this cup pass from me. But he made a decision, nevertheless, your will, not my own will, and I will follow this thing all the way to the end. We have a world that does not understand commitment. You can change, when I was coming up, there was 3 channels. And you pretty much watch one of those 3 channels. Nowadays, you can watch whatever you want, when you want, and how you want, because everything has choices and options. There is no commitment anymore. And so people are being bred into an understanding that you don't have to be committed to anything. And the problem with that is without commitment, there can be no agape type of love. Because the agape type of love is what is a choice for you, and it begins to move you into a place where you realize that the agape type of love is the only type of love that does not fail. It is the only type of love that is committed to the outcome regardless of the circumstances. It is the only type of love that will actually stick with it when things don't go well. It is the only type of love that when you wake up next to someone who does not have makeup on and looks completely different than they did the night before, and their breath stinks and their feet stinks and all kinds of things are going wrong, and you are still committed to the love of that person because you have learned that commitment overrides all other things. And when you are committed, then you have the real type of agape love, which is now dedication to the word commitment is a state or quality of being dedicated to a cause, activity, or a person. I've heard people say, find out what you love and just do more of that and you'll be happy. And there's lies, y'all. What if you love to sleep? You're going to have a hard time trying to find a way to monetize that. But see, here's what people do. They try to find their passion and then become committed to the passion. When the reality is that commitment produces passion and you become passionate about what you are committed to. Amen. And so the world thinks that passion precedes commitment, but it doesn't. And this is one of the keys to understanding agape, because agape is a perfect type of love. It is a love that doesn't fail. It's a love that if things go well, that's great. If things go bad, we're going to get through it. And so when you begin to recognize that 5 different types of love, then you start to see some trends. When you see Thelu type of love, people who are so narcissistic that it's about themselves, it's hard to be in a relationship with someone who loves themselves so much that they can't love you. And you know it when you see it. The Storge type of love, which is the love that comes from an affection or a hug or a kiss or a touch or a gesture, a pat on the back, all of that can be misinterpreted by people if it's not absolutely clear. And so you can now see when you get into the phileo type of love, which is the brotherly love or the companionship, you can have companionship with someone and not want to spend the rest of your life with them. Or you can have someone that I don't mind going to play tennis with you, or I don't mind going to play basketball with you or football with you, but I don't want to marry you. And so now this is where being clear. I wish I had known this when I was 10 years old, when I was 15 years old, when I was 18 years old. I wish I had understood these different types of love, because I thought that if there was some level of attraction, it had to be love. I thought if there was some type of affection, it had to be love. I thought if there was some type of companionship, it had to be love. And that's not always the case. It is a type of love, but it is not the kind of love you can build a successful relationship upon. And so in a marriage, if you have a agape type of love, that's the perfect love. But I don't want to dismiss all the rest, because now in the context of covenant, you need the rest of them. Right. Amen. In other words, you can't be in a marriage and not have eros as a part of it. You cannot be in a marriage and not have phileo, or the companionship, be a part of it. You cannot be in a covenant marriage and not have storge, the hug and the kiss and the touch and the acknowledgement. You cannot be in a marriage without those things. Does that make sense? But you have to recognize that if they are not existent, then you're going to struggle with trying to figure out why it's not working, thinking, I love this person, I'm committed to this person, but you have not worked to build all the other types of love as well, because they're all necessary ingredients to having successful relationships. And so now when you have phileo love for somebody, I can love and appreciate you, but I can keep you at a fellowship distance. And this is where you fit, and these are the conversations we have. And now you get through the place where you don't have to deal with such miscommunications or misinterpretations of, well, I thought this was more. I thought we were going. Why would you think that? We have no other interactions whatsoever. And young guys, unfortunately, I have to say this, I choose my words very carefully, but young guys tend to not be able to discern these types of things. See, they actually did a study and they showed that girls actually can recognize emotion long before boys can. So they showed pictures of mommy with an angry face, mommy with a smiley face, and mommy with a pouty face. And did you know that most boys, up until they're about 10, couldn't tell which one was which? Isn't that something? So what does that tell you? Men ain't that bright. No, I'm kidding. I'm teasing. What it tells you is that people are different. And you have to be very careful, because a lot of times this is where hurt feelings come in. Well, I thought we were going to be in a relationship. What made you think that? Well, because these things happen, and they're interpreting it in light of eros love. They're interpreting it in light of storge type of love. They're interpreting it in terms of agape love, and they're not recognizing the difference between what each one of these things are. And more importantly, as you begin to involve yourself in relationships, knowing how to allow different pieces of that relationship to develop. There shouldn't be, I know I'm about to sound real old-fashioned right now, but there should not be a bunch of hand-holding and kissing if it is not a relationship that is moving towards marriage. Because there should not be any of that. There needs to be some controls set in place, not so much for yourself, but for other people, so that if you have to cut ties, you can. Because if you understand a soul ties are formed through sexual relations. We know that for sure. But also, how did David and Jonathan get a soul tie? Through commitments and promises. So you got to be careful as you are dealing with people, how you deal with them. When you are in the beginning stages, we are now in phileo. We are looking to see if there's companionship, because we're starting here. And if I love myself enough, then as I deal with me, I'm not going to let you treat me any old kind of way. You're not going to ghost me. One day, we're communicating, the next day I don't hear from you. And then I don't hear from you for 6 weeks, and then you start breadcrumbing me. Hey, what you doing? How you doing? How are you? No, we're not going to do that. If your interest is there. In our church, I have one rule. If anybody serves in a ministry of helps and they're single and they start dating somebody, I have one rule. I don't choose who you date. I don't care who you date or court. I'm using them interchangeably, but I want you to understand I mean court. I don't care. What I do care about is you will sit together. You will not come to service and not sit next to each other. Because I need you to make a public declaration that we are pursuing something here, because you will not be dating multiple people in our church. You just won't be doing it. And so everybody needs to know what is clear and what is going on. Because for me, it's a problem when you find people that try to keep things secret. Because anything that's done in a secret is going to be a problem. And this is where the type of love that you function in will be a telltale sign of everything that's going on in the relationship. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go, if you would, to 2 Samuel 13. And we're going to start in verse 2. And Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimea, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very subtle man. In other words, he's very slick. And he said unto him, Why art thou, being the king's son, lean from day to day? Wilt thou not tell me? And Amnon said unto him, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. And Jonadab said unto him, Lay thee down on thy bed, make thyself sick. And when thy father cometh to see thee, say unto him, I pray thee, let my sister Tamar come and give me meat, and dress the meat in my sight, that I may see it and eat it at her hand. And so Amnon lay down, made himself sick. And when the king was come to see him, Amnon said unto the king, I pray thee, let Tamar my sister come, and make me a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat her bread. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, Go now to my brother Amnon's house, and dress him meat. So Tamar went to her brother's house, and he was laid down, and he took flour and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and did bake the cakes. And she took a pan, poured them out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, Have out all men from me. And they went out every man from him. And Amnon said to Tamar, Bring me the meat into my chamber, that I may eat of thy hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made, and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. And when she had brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her, and said unto her, Come lie with me, my sister. And she answered him, Nay, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not do this folly. And I, whether shall I come cause my shame to go? And as for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. Howbeit he would not hearken unto her voice, but being a stranger, or being stronger than she, forced her and laid with her. And then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. And Amnon said unto her, Arise, and be gone. And she said unto him, There is no cause. This evil in sending me away is greater than the other that thou hast done unto me. But he would not hearken unto her. David is known to be a great king, but David was a terrible father. He's a bad husband, but he's a terrible father. And it's amazing to me how, in this story, Amnon really was in eros love for his sister, when he should have had a phileo and a storge type of love for his sister, and he didn't. And eros drove him to the point where he needed to scratch an itch. And this is the first sign of somebody doing the walk of shame after an intimate encounter. Because now he's telling her to get out, because love has now changed to hatred. And I want you to see the different types of love all in operation in the same story. She loved him as a brother. She's there to help him to serve and to take care of him because he's sick. He loves her in an eros type of way and just wants to be intimate with her. All the while, this is his sister. Here he has a friend, Jonadab, who is about as subtle as Satan himself, who gives him phileo advice as a friend, which means you need to watch your friends, because you cannot have friends that have corrupt morals. People think you can still keep a friend. Oh, I just don't want to judge them. I just don't want to be judging. Listen, if you got two eyes and you got a brain, you ought to be able to judge situations. And not everybody should be a friend. Because in the midst of his lust, he yielded to a friend who gave him bad advice. Because he was so consumed with eros that he couldn't see straight. And so now here he's violating the nature and the type of love, because he's put himself in a position where he should not have been. This is not moral crisis. This is not a accident. This is premeditation and predation. He is a predator, and he's literally set a trap for her, and she has now fallen into it. And now people want to try to pray away what they really are going to have to learn to disciple away. Because as you begin to deal with these different types of love and you recognize within yourself certain things that may not be appropriate or certain things that may not be right, you're not going to pray that away. You're going to have to disciple that way. In other words, you're going to have to use discipline. And when you are single, discipline becomes your greatest asset. Because listen to me, in your discipline, you will always reveal the attacks against you. It is always people who have no discipline that always end up in a situation and be like, I don't know how I got here. And it's because you have no discipline, you have no boundaries, and without discipline and boundaries, you will find yourself neck deep in situations you really did not want to be in. Right. And so I think it is interesting because as he is really desiring after her, notice her answer. She says, just ask the king. He won't withhold me from you. She took it to commitment. And he's like, I don't want commitment. All I want is, see, the nature of it is sin is always taking a legitimate desire and using it in an illegitimate way. When she responded and said, I'm fine with that, just go see the king and he'll sanction all this, but don't do this to me. She was letting him know, I'm willing to be committed. But again, she's dealing from a different type of love. He's coming from one perspective and one perspective only. Can you see how these different types of love are literally working against each other? Because she's saying, let's do commitment, and then you can have eros. And we can have it in the proper context that it belongs in. And I thought it was really interesting how she then said, don't do this to me. She said, there's no cause. Verse 16. This evil in sending me away is greater than what thou did unto me. She literally said, the fact that you raped me is not even the biggest issue. It's that you had sex with me and now you are dismissing me and you won't even marry me. In other words, you'll shack up with me, but you won't commit to me. And people think, well, there's no big deal with shacking up. It's a problem. Yeah. It's a huge problem. Because when you are shacking up, now you have gotten the milk and you do not have to buy the cow. And people say, well, how come he won't propose to me? Because you haven't required him to propose. You haven't made it a condition. You've allowed him to continue to dabble in places he should not have been. He still gets the cookie whenever he wants it. Why would he marry you? You have demonstrated to him you are not marriage material. Are y'all here? And then vice versa with women towards men. You have to understand that there is indications when you're dealing with people based on what type of love they're trying to approach you with. And if you are a person who wants an agape type of love, a commitment love, and you want eros, and you want in the context of agape, and you want phileo, and you want storge, and you want thelu, and you want all these types of love in the fullness of what God intended, then you better be able to recognize where people's approach is coming from. Because if you don't know it, you're going to misinterpret it, and next thing you know, you're going to be sitting crushed, heartbroken, tears, trying to figure out how did you get here, and it's because you missed all the signs of what type of love you were dealing with. When you start to become clear, then you say, okay, look, I know what this is. I can see where this is. I can see what this is going to be. And you now begin to realize it's not okay. It's not okay to be shacked up. It's not okay to abuse this relationship. It's not okay to try to force me down these roads. It's not okay to lead me into this first without showing me we're going to be covenant partners. We're going to be committed to each other. You're taking me into places that I just don't want to go. And all the while, covenanting always respects proper boundaries, and it protects the other person. When I've had different couples and things like that have come to me, and they're living together or whatever the case may be, I'll always pull the man aside and I'll say, listen, if you love her, protect her. If you really love her like you say you do, aren't you concerned about her reputation? See, that's the level that moves beyond eros and it moves into the agape type of love. Because a true covenant type of love is not coveting, it's covenanting. Are you understanding what I'm saying? And as you begin to covenant, then your desire is always to protect the person you are with. In other words, make an honest man out of him or make an honest woman out of her. Because the desire is to protect their relationship and not allow them to be seen in a bad light, because you care enough about them to not put them through the types of things that people do all the time, and they just tolerate it and call it, well, we're just a modern day relationship. Amen? All right, I think we've hit 45, so I'll